In 2007, I got a nursing job up north in a little village on the Hudson Bay coast called Puvirnituk. At least that's how us Halunak called it. The Inuit pronounced it more like Puvunituk. And it actually,
Hang on.
fun.
What's a halanak?
Oh, a Halunak, that's us white people that
Oh,
were
that's right.
up there to work,
That's
We're the
that's
non, ba no, basically not white people, it's non-Inuit.
that's sort of Inuit for gringo or
Exactly.
Muzungo.
Yes.
Okay.
Same idea. Um, The other funny thing about this village name is that it had about like three spellings officially, so like you pretty much couldn't spell it wrong. I worked in this little village of about 1,600 inhabitants for 2 years, and in those 2 years, one day, a whole bunch of military planes started landing at the airport, and the village was all of a sudden swarming with people. News travels quickly in a small village, and we found out that the military was there for training. They ended up disappearing into the tundra where they stayed for the few weeks that they were up there, and we didn't really see much of them. And I remember thinking that it was a bit strange that the military was training in the Arctic. Well, it all makes sense to me now that I've read today's book. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with author Bill Donahue about his book, Unbound.
Unbound is a collection of some of the best stories Bill has written about endurance sport for Runner's World, Outside, Backpacker, Washington Post Magazine, etc., etc. The stories are divided into 5 subcategories, which make up the sections of the book. Those subcategories are running, cycling, exploration, on the snow, and from the margins of endurance sport, which is kind of the chapter at the end that collects all the weird stuff. Let me tell you a bit about Bill. Bill Donahue is a journalist. We have so many journalists
Mm-hmm.
on our podcast. In reporting stories, he searched for fallen meteorites in the Sahara Desert, snuck into Manuel Noriega's abandoned beach house, and camped out with army soldiers in minus 30 degrees chill of the Alaskan Arctic. Aha, hence Liz's story. He's worked in over 20 countries while writing for publications ranging from blah, blah. I've just mentioned them all, basically. Bill's work has been republished in several anthologies, including Best American Sports Writing and Best American Travel Writing, and he has won the Lowell Thomas Gold Medal for Adventure Travel Writing, as well as the City and Regional Magazine Awards. Bill lives in rural New Hampshire, where he goes out cycling or skiing almost every day. I guess he doesn't go skiing in New Hampshire in summer, but probably very easily in winter. So, welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Oh, well, thanks, and it's great to be here.
We'll start you off with the usual
The
bog
easy
standard
question
question.
first.
Yeah. How did you decide to write this book? I gather it's your first book. I can't believe that.
Yeah, I've really mostly just written long form magazine stories. And in fact, I didn't really have a plan to write this book. The pieces in it date back to 2004. The latest one is in the book is, I think, early 2023. I graduated from college in the late 80s and just began working as a journalist. I had been a runner in college. Then I ended up taking a fair amount of time off from endurance sports, but I got back into it in 2004 or so when I was about 40, and I started to gravitate towards writing about endurance sports, and as well as many other things. And anyway, the endurance sports stories sort of piled up, and then in late 2022, it dawned on me, hey, I have a whole collection. I have a book's worth of things here, and I sought out a publisher, and I found one.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so, were there any, you have a whole collection. You must have had some that didn't make the book in the end?
I did, yeah. And that was really more a question of everything singing to each other. For example, I had a story that I wrote about a hiker who was trying to hike the perimeter of North America. He was setting up a new trail, and this was in 2020. He just sort of had the most 2020 experience of all. He got sick. He sort of had to deal with
COVID.
other people's paranoia where they were chasing him off
Yeah.
their property and so on. And I felt like I had too many hiking stories, and I liked the story, but it seemed sort of a slice in time that might not age well. So I cut that one out. Just for example, there was probably 8 stories that I ended up cutting out. There was also some stories that I really wanted to go in that it's extremely annoying. I didn't get the rights to.
Oh,
I think we all know that Sports Illustrated is a magazine that has gone to the dogs. And I had written 2 stories for them. I really wanted to go in there. And they said, yes, you can put them in your book, but you're going to have to pay us $1,500 for each one of those stories. And I was like, I wrote the story. I'm not going to pay you
Yeah.
for it.
yeah.
So that was a story about the Iditarod. I followed the Iditarod,
Are you allowed
and
to tell us about them? Will we get a bill from Sports Illustrated if you mention them?
Sports Illustrated is going to send you a bill, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and then the other one was which story I really liked, which was about Todd Palin, Sarah Palin's husband. I followed him in the Iron Dog snowmobile race across Alaska. So
Oh,
those would
wow.
have fleshed out the On the Snow chapter, but
Oh,
alas,
wow.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, at least we get to talk about them a little bit now. We've mentioned them.
yeah, yeah.
So if people go, "Oh, wow, if those are the types of stories, I'll be getting the book if it's got."
Okay, okay.
Did you have is there a sort of theme that runs through, or is it just sort of loosely endurance? Were there specific sort of story aspects that attract you to the things you wrote
Yeah,
about?
the topic I would say is endurance sports, but honestly, what lures me to a story is really not the topic; it's the narrative potential. I mean, I'm trying to write narrative nonfiction, and I'm looking for big stories, characters, and
Hmm.
crisis, in a very broad sense, and adventure, things going wrong, things at stake that are up in the air. You don't know how it's going to turn out. These are all the components of what makes a good story. And, as I wrote this book, I wrote many stories that didn't have to do with endurance sports. The fact that I came up with so many on that topic just has to do with the fact that I am an endurance athlete, and my eye is sort of peeled for those things, and I find them. So,
Yeah, you had one about a gravel cyclist, and it sounded like you sort of just happened upon this gravel race that you attended, not in the pursuit of a story, I don't think, just you were in the area, or it was close to home, so you ended up being there, and then you got this story of this Kenyan team that was there. So did a lot of the stories happen sort of, you were
By
in the right
association?
place. Yeah, in the right
Yeah.
place, the right
well, I'll tell you
time.
a funny story about that gravel thing. So, I'm a pretty cycling and cross country skiing are sports that I try to do as I race. I try to do as well as I can at these sports. And the race that she's alluding to is it's what's it called? I'm blanking on the name now. It's Vermont Overland, and that's kind of the biggest gravel race in my region. I live in New Hampshire. Uh, so it wasn't a stretch that I went to that. There's probably 1,200 people. So right after I finished the race, I'm standing in line for a beer, and I see this guy there, and I said to him, "Hey, how'd your race go?" He's going, it went very well. I won the race. I'm like, you won the race. I'm like, I came in
Now
like,
you feel really embarrassed.
200th or something, And it turns out this was a guy in this Kenyan team. So I had a connection to that, and I thought it was very cool because it was, that's a sport that's pretty white sport,
Yeah.
and it was really cool to see someone come into that space and win. And then, I only heard a couple of days later that someone had died in the race. And it was his teammate, also a Kenyan. And it just was horrible to take that in. And one thing led to another. And I ended up going to Kenya to talk to the widow of the guy who died, his teammates, and sort of write about the emergence of this team in a sport, trying to establish an African presence in a sport that really didn't have one. So, yeah.
Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's Caffeine Bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. And it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor. They're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the...
Speaking of which, back to the podcast. It seems like they still don't have one.
In cycling?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Biniam Girmay, the Eritrean cyclist, won the green jersey in the Tour de France last year. So he's the best sprinter in the race.
Okay.
So that's a major advance. But yeah, it's. I think road cycling. I mean, I don't know how deeply you want me to get into it, but road cycling more than gravel cycling, the bar for entry is high, and that's because to gain points on the circuit that will elevate you to get into the Tour de France or something, you have to do all these minor races in lesser races in Europe. You have to be there in Europe, and you have to be in that culture, which is pretty exclusive.
And probably expensive.
But no, there's increasingly a presence. It's still small, but it's a challenge. Certainly relative to running. I mean, running is dominated by African athletes. That's not the case with cycling.
Is the motivation the same in terms of, I don't know, we've done quite a few things on running with some of the East African countries and players. And, their motivation is to transform their lives by, winning the big race somewhere once and getting the prize money. Is the motivation to sort of win a big prize and get them, repatriate the money back to their homeland and their families and change their standard of living?
Maybe. I mean, the money in running is just a lot more.
Okay.
I mean, the infrastructure for running is a lot more, and by extension, the depth of the field of cyclists is just nowhere near what it is for running. And so these guys that get involved, they don't have a big chance of going to the Tour de France or something and winning. Okay. There is, it is attractive in that they get on with the team and then Team Amani, and they get a stipend. But it's very scant. It's a living. Okay. It's not a way to sort of bring your family into the next
All right. So
economic
it's
collapse.
it's not as transformational as
Not yet.
As winning.
Evans Chibet or something like that.
No, no, not at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Vinny and Girmay, yeah, he's a big name now. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what he
Yeah.
makes, but it's probably could be making $1 million a year, but he's like one guy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very
Out of
punchy
a whole
pyramid. Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Bill, you said something just casually in passing while you were answering the last question, which really brought back to me a question that I have in nearly all of the stories in the book, in fact. And you said, so I saw this guy, and one thing led to another. And within that phrase, and then you said one thing led to another, and I went to Kenya. Oh yeah, just to us mere mortals, just going off to Kenya, and we see in your book, you went off to Alaska, you went off to spend time with somebody in an event somewhere. Please explain, what is this one thing led to another process?
You
Because
mean, are you asking me how I get contracts or sort of
yeah,
how?
yeah.
How do you end up on all these other
Yeah,
countries?
it kind
Like,
of occurs to me as a mere mortal, who doesn't go off around the world, that there's a process going on here that you know we we never hear about.
Yeah. Well, when I say one thing led to another, I can't remember what the time lag was
Hmm.
exactly, but the race was in late August, and I ended up in Kenya just before Christmas time. So it wasn't like the next
It's
day I was on a flight.
it's a 6 month
okay,
process. Yeah.
Yeah, and that had to do with, well, first of all, I mean, I have connections with editors that I remember
Yeah.
one time I ran across somebody, and I had just had a story in the New York Times Magazine, and she said to me, "I'm guessing that probably happened because you had a connection there." And I said, "Yeah, that's how it happened." And she said,
Hmm.
"I knew it." Like as if like my parents had paid this person or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, I did have a
you
connection
have no
there.
skill. I knew that you had no skill or talent.
That was
You
a
just happened.
subtext,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, I had a connection there, and sure, I started life with advantages. I mean, I went to a nice college, et cetera, et cetera. But I built up these um, connections over time, and I'm a somewhat trusted entity. They know that if they're going to send me to Kenya, I'm not going to just smoke dope or something, you know.
hmm
But so I can't exactly remember in that instance what the process was, but I was working with an editor I know well and I like, and you know emails went back and forth. We probably talked on the phone, and we sort of envisioned what it would look like, how it would come together. Um, and actually, in that instance, so that editor is at Hearst, where my editor has her hand in 3 Hearst publications, that being uh, bicycling, for which I did the story about the gravel riders,
Yeah.
Runner's World, and Popular Mechanics.
Okay.
Um, and so she was like, "Well, while you're there, why don't you try to interview Eliud Kipchoge? Because at that
Mhm.
point we knew he was going to run the Boston Marathon."
okay,
Um,
okay, yeah. I was saying like I remember the year that he was going to do his first Boston. It was a big deal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess another facet of one thing led to another is that's very much the spirit of journalism, in that
Mhm.
like you go down a path, things don't work out. It's a circuitous path, and that was certainly the case in this instance. I went to Kenya, and I tried to get access to Eliud Kipchoge, and he did not give it. In fact, he's got a very taut PR machine around him. I don't know. My suspicion is it's 5% him and 95% of the people around him. They shut me down. They said no. And we were sort of like, well, we can still do a story about him and just not interview him. And I went to his town, his village in which he grew up. The premise was I was going to sort of talk to people about his early days, like when he was a teenager and so on. But this PR machine was very had a lot of leverage, and they then basically put the word out to people in the town to not talk to me.
Oh,
So
Oh, wow.
I didn't get very far, and I retreated somewhat hastily from that town.
Yeah.
I went back to my hotel, and it dawned on me that Evans Chibet's training camp was about a quarter mile down the road. And I got in touch with his publicity people, and it was an absolutely different vibe. It was like, yeah, he's right over there. Go chat with him, And,
Wow.
within, I'm not kidding, like
voilà.
24 hours, I was sitting across from Evans Chibet, and he couldn't have been more generous with his time and just very open. So there's a major element of serendipity. It's a little like gambling, whether you're going to get the story, whether you're going to get access. All these things are always up in the air. And if they're not, if there's no sense of one thing leading to another, the story is probably going to be dead in the water. I mean, if it's just pat and you can sort of envision the whole thing from the get-go, you don't really have a story that has that breathes.
I guess probably one of the tricks is as you're going towards a story, you keep your peripheral vision open. So you keep looking from side to side just in case you see something else shining off to the side.
Oh, you mean like if I'm in a place, try to get a second story kind of thing?
Yeah, well, you went to see Kipchoge, but you didn't get tunnel vision on the Kipchoge story. You stayed open to other opportunities and so on, and
Well,
changed gears.
that wasn't evidence of my genius. I mean, I was staying in this town called Cap de Gat, and I happened to wake up early in the morning, and I would go out, and you would see these guys that were, probably 6 feet, 130 pounds, running down the street, with absolute elegance. And it's like, well, there's a lot. Kipchoge's not the only good runner here, So,
There's a lot of running stories in this
yeah,
100-yard circle. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So since we are on a running podcast, what's your running story? Because you did do some running. I mean, I know that now you do a lot of skiing and cycling, but you started off as a runner, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably not super unusual. I was not so great at stick and ball sports, and
That sounds very familiar.
yeah. And I also noticed that when we had to do laps at school for gym class or whatever, I was pretty good. I was a skinny kid, and I could shine relative to other people. And so I got involved with the cross country team at my high school when I was a sophomore, and I wasn't a star or anything, but I decided I was going to run in college, and I did. I just walked onto it. Was a Division III team, but it was a very good team. Colby College I went to in Maine, and we were one of the best Division III teams in the country. I'm sorry, in New England. And I ran cross country and track there, and it was just really kind of the central part of my college experience. So I'm still friends with the people that I ran with. Um, but I injured my back my junior year. I was doing a lot of running. Did a junior year abroad, and I was in London, and I decided I was going to train for the London Marathon. I probably ran my best time at that point. I ran a 1:13 for a half marathon, but I injured my back, and I felt like I just couldn't make it back. And so for a number of years, I was a little bit in the wilderness, like I was strayed from my roots as an endurance athlete. But then, as I said, when I was about 40, I started getting into cycling. Soon after that, into cross-country ski racing. And, it really felt like I was regrounding myself in an important part of my past. And those two sports are I'm all about them now. So I've got religion, and I don't run at all, but my partner's a runner. A lot of people around me are runners. So I know a lot about running, and I really appreciate it. And in some ways, I feel it's got to be the oldest sport, and it's in some ways it's the best sport. It's just very basic. You don't need stuff. You just go out and do it. So I have a real romance for running, and I certainly follow it, and I tune into running whenever I hear about it. So.
I hate to hear that you're not doing it, though. I would recommend you to an institute called Park Run, and then you can go and you can run at your level, whatever it is. If you haven't come across the concept of Park Run,
what is that?
There you go. One of our previous podcasts covers the global phenomenon now called Park Run, one word, started by a South African guy in the UK, where he started these free to enter forever 5K timed runs. Basically, the emphasis being on participation, but you register for free, you have a barcode, and your time is registered, and you can go anywhere they're having one of these runs, and there are more than 500 in the UK, more than 500 in Australia, many fewer in the US and Canada. I think there are about 50 or 60 in Canada. But
Okay.
These occur on Saturday at 9 o'clock, usually every Saturday. You turn up, you run, you get your time. In 20 minutes, you get an email with all the results, and it costs you nothing ever.
Well, I mean, I'm supportive of that institution, but I don't think I really want to do it.
Okay.
First of all, because I do think that I guess the bottom line is just that, like, I think there's much to be said for starting sports when you're in middle age, because you can't compare yourself to your younger self. Like, my times, if I was to run now, would be way worse than when I ran then. And I don't really want to think about that.
Of course they would.
So,
Yeah.
so I mean, like, I'm actually probably a better cross-country skier now than when I was 45. So, and I'm 60. So there's something really gratifying about that would not be, I would not have that sense of joy if, like, I was going, from my times are just getting increasingly slower. That's so. I mean, that's just my thing. But
yeah, you have to view it as a new start from zero, and not compare it with looking backwards, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people have these arbitrary like cutoffs that they'll use. So I've heard someone say like, "Oh, this is my over 40 PB," because they like reset all their PBs from their younger days. They like forgot all of them, and then it's like they're starting from zero. It's my over 40 PB. So maybe you could do something like that.
Yeah, that's good. I don't
I
know.
mean,
I mean, I feel. I mean, I know you guys are runners, but I don't feel bereft not running.
Okay, that's good.
That's
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
I feel like
Let us.
I'm like very satisfied with the sports I'm doing.
I suddenly feel like Liz and I are now Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on your door, saying, "Have you heard about running, sir?" Can we tell you about it a little bit? So
Okay,
maybe we should just move on from that.
that's all right.
We can let you know how to get started.
Yeah.
But I will say this, that my partner, I've been with her for 3 years, and she wasn't an endurance athlete really. She had been a pretty hardcore yogi, a hiker, but she met me. I don't know if it was me, but whatever. She just decided she was going to start running, and now she's running all the time, and she's a pretty good runner. So I get a lot of vicarious enjoyment out of.
That's good.
Oh, fantastic. You can tell her
Yeah.
about Parkrun. Maybe she'd like it.
I will also say that I've always, speaking of evangelical, I've tried to get her to run competitively. I think she would do pretty well, but she doesn't have any interest in that. So I've been the failed evangelist on that front.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Our approach is you need to run for a lifetime and you need to run for joy. If you get joy out of the competition, well, that's good. If you don't, stay with the joy.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, I agree.
Bill, your book's about a whole series of different, very, very different stories. So probably, I would have to ask you a few questions just very specifically about some specific stories. I don't want to give the whole book away, but I also want to give good tasters to good snippets for the audience. You wrote a very interesting story about Galen Rupp, where you went to see Galen Rupp. I guess before he reached the peak of his achievements. In fact,
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, how did that go? And do you think, in retrospect, you should have interviewed not so much Galen Rupp, but Alberto Salazar, who was his coach at the time, given what's happened afterwards?
Well, so yeah, that with one exception, that's the oldest story in the book. I reported in 2004 when Galen was 19. He had just graduated from college, and he was taking a year off before he went to University of Oregon. No, I don't. I don't regret it. I haven't done a comprehensive search of the literature, but I think that was, a pretty foundational profile of a guy who I kind of picked a winner.
Yeah.
I guessed that he was going to shine, and he did. And there was no other big profile of Galen Rupp early on. Yeah, I mean, do I wish I broke the story about Alberto Salazar and his cheating and so on? I do, but I'm not really that kind of investigative reporter.
Yeah.
My story does hint at his Machiavellian instincts. So no, I don't regret it. I'm happy. I do think that Alberto Salazar is a ever intricate and intriguing guy. A friend of mine, I used to live in Portland, Oregon. A friend of mine, John Brandt, has written 2 books. You should have him on your podcast. He's written 2 books about Alberto Salazar, one being a Duel in the Sun about his, I think it was a 1980.
With Dick Beardsley.
Yeah, right. He basically, it was a showdown in the Boston Marathon where he was duking it out with Dick Beardsley. And then another one, which was about Alberto Salazar having a heart attack and almost dying. So, he's plumbed Alberto for all his material. That's been his turf,
I mean, Liz and I have read quite a bit about, the whole story around, particularly following one of Liz's big fans, big heroes, Karagacha. And we've read a lot about this, the ultimate, the full story featuring Alberto Salazar. And I have to say that reading your early story in 2004, you can see it, looking back at your story, having seen how everything panned out, the aspects that you see in your story or the roots of what could happen and what has ultimately happened. To that extent, your story on Gillen stands the test of time, because it reflects accurately, I think, the characters.
Yeah, I think so. What's interesting about Adam, and so for those people who don't know, well, Kara Goucher is a leading marathoner, and her husband, Adam Goucher, was a little
Yeah.
bit older, 2 or 3 years older, was a huge star at University of Colorado, and then was a leading like 5K guy
Yeah.
in the United States. And Kara Goucher later really soured on Salazar and was leading the fight against him. But interesting, when I did that story, they were like true believers. I mean, like they were drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
At that very moment, I think Adam Goucher was injured and he wasn't running. And I remember going out to coffee with the two of them, and they were just like, Alberto's the greatest. He told me to stop running and to nurse this injury, and that's the right thing to do. And, you know, I never would have seen that myself. You know, it's just like they kind of did a 180, you know. But I guess that's the way those things are.
It's hard because you have a coach that you see like every day. It's a bit like a family member almost. So, and part of the one of the things. So my coach used to always say, you have to trust your training. And so I guess like it's part of it, right? If you're an athlete and you decide to have a coach, it's because you trust the coach and you trust the training and like you don't want to be questioning it all the time because now you're adding a layer of complexity to everything. You put your trust in this person so fully that like it's almost normal that you're blind to certain things that they might not be right about.
I would equate it. Yeah, I would agree. I would equate it to like someone who gets divorced. When they're in the marriage, they have to believe in it. They have to justify it, and they have to work towards making it work.
Hmm.
But then at a certain point, they turn a corner, and it's just like, oh my God, what was I doing? You know?
Yeah.
A couple of the stories made me incredibly sad. Interesting to read them, but sort of they don't all have happy endings, really. And I would say the one particular one that made me sad was listening to your story about one of my younger childhood heroes, Henry Rono. We touched on Henry Rono a little bit because we spoke with Philbert Bailly on our podcast some time ago. But Henry Rono was like the dominant world champion in the 70s. I think 4 times world record holder for different distances. So quite dominant. And I get the impression that, if he didn't come to power in the 70s, but he'd come to power in the 2000 and somethings when Diamond League was around and big dollar prizes, that, his life would have been much, much, much different. Do you think the Western world let him down after his running career, or do you not make those evaluations? Do you just report what you find, basically?
In putting a story together, you have to make judgments and conclusions and so on. And yeah, I mean, I would say that he was let down, from the time he got here. I mean, Henry Rono, just for some context, I mean, he set these dazzling world records, and I think that's ice falling off my roof, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
Incredible.
ice. Jeez.
yeah.
Hopefully that'll come out in the recording and we'll actually hear it, and
Okay.
I'll keep it in.
Gives you a taste of rural New
Yeah.
Hampshire. Yeah, I can't remember, but it was like a 10-week period in 1978. He just set these records that were unassailable. But yeah, he was a guy who was recruited from Kenya when he was not 18 at the time. I don't know. He would have been 25 or something like that. And brought to Washington State University, Eastern Washington, very white place. And there was no infrastructure for him. He was a fish out of water in ways that I don't think runners today would be, simply because there's a pathway for them. More of them will come here from Kenya and Ethiopia and so on. And also, I just don't think there was the sensitivity that here's this young guy that's come here who's probably hardly left Kenya and we're going to throw him into this very different place. I mean, I think there's also the individual component. I think that for whatever reason, Henry Rono was just sort of a haunted guy. I don't know too much about his childhood in Nandi, which is the town he grew up in the Rift Valley of Kenya. But he was always a sort of bitter guy, and there must have been some seed of that early on. And he came here and he started drinking a lot. Even when he was running at top level, he would get really drunk like the night before a race or something. Wow. And then he'd go out and set a world record. It was just sort of unbelievable. And at one point, I don't know what year it was, 78, 80, something like that. He had a showdown at Hayward Field with Alberto Salazar 10,000. And Rono would get out of shape in between race seasons and stuff. And it was said that he won that race by the width of his jiggling belly. Yeah. But my story documented a really sad chapter in his life where after he ran, he just had such a rough time. He was fighting alcoholism. He worked as a parking lot attendant, this and that. He was homeless for a while. And then at age 55 in 2007, he decided he wanted to come back and break the Masters world record mile, the 55 plus. And the record was maybe 440 or something. And he was really overweight. And he still had obvious talent. So even for a guy who was 55 and overweight, I mean, his times were dazzling, but they were like a minute off. They were way, way off. And he came to Oregon to participate in a track meet in pursuit of this record. And the actual record holder that was there, this guy's name was Nolan Shahid, and he looked very much the part. I think he was 5'9", 112 pounds or something. And just, he's a master. And, he of course, I don't know if he lapped Rono, but it was not close, it was just buried him. But he was incredibly gracious about it. And he told Rono, "You're my hero," and so on. But it was a sad thing, He just had the aura of sadness and bitterness about him. And, as I understand, he kind of died ensconced in that bubble. I mean, he died a year or so ago, and the New York Times did a story about it, and I think he sort of never left his farm, and it was sad. He was not doing well. And he wasn't that old either. He was 72 or something.
That's sad.
And there are a couple of other stories you have that are similarly sad, but I think for me, because I guess I have a childhood mental picture of Rono, storming around the track.
Yeah. I mean, his absolute master. It's sad to see what happened.
In that same section, this story is not so sad. You talk about another author named Bernd Heinrich, who wrote the book. It's a book that we actually haven't covered yet, even though both Alan and I have it in our bookshelves and we haven't read it yet. Why We Run.
Okay.
But I know it's well known in the running community. Like, everybody talks about this book, and you got to go interview this author. But being an author yourself, like, were you nervous about the idea, and how did it all turn out?
Turns out a friend of mine, his father is friends with Bernd Heinrich. So that was a little bit of an in. And Bernd Heinrich at the time was in a relationship with another famous runner, Lynn Jennings, who was an Olympic bronze medalist. And she was very much an advocate that he should do this story. So that was helpful. I got access. Generally speaking, I think Bert he's a hermit kind of, I mean, he's a very amiable guy, but he shuns publicity. He shuns attention. He just wants to live his life, he's living a very valuable life, and that's how it should be. But I was lucky to get in. Did I feel nervous? Not really. I mean, I don't know. I don't put people up on pedestals, and he was an absolutely amiable guy, and also he's an open guy. He's vulnerable, he's fragile, and he exposed that to me, and so I just felt like I was dealing with another human being. I didn't feel like I was dealing with a literary god or something.
Yeah, and to that extent, the story was also not really a running story. It was,
Yeah.
a nature story to some extent.
Yeah, its
Yeah.
inclusion in this book is a little arguable because it's not like I followed him over the course of a marathon, but he is a runner. I really like the story, and I guess there's also an endurance
Mm.
component to his tale, in that at a very late age, in his late 70s, he proved to be incredibly productive in a literary sense, and he's like living
Mm-hmm.
off the grid, chopping wood and so on, and also was at that time still running at a pretty high level, and in fact he's still running at 83 or 84. So
Hey, if you can put pogo stick jumping in your book, I don't think you have to make excuses for putting this type of story in your book.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Before we get into pogo stick running, though, or jumping,
I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there.
you don't want to go
No,
there?
no, that's
Oh,
fine.
okay. Okay. I mean, you know what though? It that story really spoke to just like how we were as kids. I mean, without the influence of like YouTube and TikTok, I don't know, you'd make up these strange challenges. Like I didn't have a pogo stick, but I remember we used to have this kind of like device. All the girls had this. It like probably your daughters had it. It was like you would put it around one ankle
Yeah, and had a
and
ball on the end,
it had a ball on the end that
and
would
it
like
spun
count the
round, and you'd
tours.
step over it.
Yes, yeah. So you were kind of like skipping, but it wasn't a skipping rope. It was like, and we would just like count and try and do as many as we could,
Mm.
and we'd have like competitions like that.
If
So the pogo
Bill
stick,
had known you then, he would been around to see whether he could either write
pogo
a
stick
story
over
about
the
it or pogo stick better than you.
uh-huh.
Yeah, but before we get to that, there's an explorer section, and you interview a lady that seems quite interesting, Sarah Marquis.
Okay, yeah.
So she's done a whole bunch of incredible adventures, which you talk about in the story. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me was she would like go around dressed as a man,
Um,
kind of like a way of protecting herself. And I don't know, I just wanted to maybe see what you thought about, why is it that women have to dress like men and why can't men dress like men and women can just dress like women when they're, doing the same thing?
well, this is an unfortunate dynamic. I mean, my partner is just about to go to Nepal. She's a professor. She's doing some research there, and she wants to run. She's researched it, and pretty much like it looks like she can't run without incurring possible danger, or insults and jeering and so on. I guess the short answer is the patriarchy is alive and well
Mm.
Mm.
all over the world. It's a sad, unfortunate thing, and I think people like that are to be applauded for not acquiescing to it.
Yeah, I mean, she seemed an incredibly formidable lady. This
Yeah.
Sarah.
Oh, yeah. And there's examples in running, certainly, like Catherine Switzer in the Boston Marathon. You
Yeah,
probably know that story where
absolutely.
1967, I think, she dressed as a man because women weren't allowed to run, and Jock Semple, the race organizer, tackled her. Um,
Yeah,
and she kept running. So, I mean, I guess I do at some level regret that that's probably it's not the only story about a woman in the book, but it's the only one that engages that theme, which is, I think, a pretty prominent theme. But I think there's a number of women writers, female writers who have, eloquently talked about this. So,
Yeah, actually, in that very same story, you also talk about, I think it was because Sarah brought this up that her idol was another woman that was a great explorer, and I can't
Oh
remember
yeah.
the name.
Yep.
And she had like a little mini, mini museum. And Sarah was saying that, had it been a man to do all of the things that she did, she would have had like an entire
Hall
building
of Fame.
dedicated to
Yeah.
her. Yeah. But
Yeah, that's
because it was
true.
a
And
woman,
I'm wishing now it was a Swiss explorer. I'm blanking on the name. But yeah,
yeah,
it was a tiny one room thing that was sort of very quaintly appointed. It was not as if they got a $4 million grant from the Swiss government to have interactive exhibits or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Very meager. That's an unfortunate thing. And that's actually a motif that I think is important in journalism in general, sports journalism. How people are remembered. There's a story that I wanted to that I considered putting in the book, but I didn't because it was an outlier. It was the only historical piece that would have been in there. But I wrote a story about a runner named Lon Myers. Did you guys ever hear of him?
no.
That sort of proves my point. I mean, he was the best runner, arguably, of the 19th century, best American runner. And he ran a lot of distances, everything from like the 200 up to like the 2 mile, maybe. His heyday was around 1882, 1880, and he was Jewish, and he was a Sephardic Jew. The primary keeper of the flame in sort of preserving people's legacies at that time was the New York Athletic Club, which, of course, has a deep history of anti-Semitism, and he was not allowed into that club.
Okay.
And there's plaques all over. If you go to that place in New York, there's plaques all over the place. They're all about sort of aggrandizing athletic figures of the past, but he was not aggrandized in this manner, and as a result, no one knows who he was, and he died penniless, and so on. So I mean, I do. That is something I try to think about as I conceptualize stories. Try to elevate people that you might not have, whose story might never be told. In the book. So when you think about the Kenyan runners, I mean, we know who Kipchoge is, and we have some sense of what his story is, but that's kind of an outlier. Like almost all of these African champions, we know them only as like, well, she's from Kenya, she's from Ethiopia, whatever. We don't know their
Hmm.
story. And Evans Chebet was kind of in that vein. Interesting story. He won the New York Marathon in 2022, and he doesn't really speak English very well. He doesn't speak English at all, actually. And his primary language is a tribal language, but he also speaks Swahili. So when it came time to interview him after the race, the New York City Marathon didn't have a Swahili interpreter on hand.
Yeah.
Did you not think that like somebody who speaks Swahili could do well in the race?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I mean, I just felt like, I mean, I was looking for a story to tell, but it's also like this is a guy who we might not really know his story if I don't go tell it. So I wanted to tell that story. So yeah.
Okay, that's good. It's good insight to some things that are actually not in the book, but also some insights into why history kind of doesn't value, but reports certain things and not other things. Yeah.
Well, as they say, history is written by the victors or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
the winners write history. Yeah.
Yeah.
With respect to the characters, is there anything that you see as a thread running through some of the people who are in all sorts of different walks of lives and times and situations? Is there a common quality or a character trait or
Uh,
something that kind of repeats quite often?
well, that question was not on me. It was, and I'm happy for it. It was really on Alex Hutchinson, who Canadian,
Yeah.
and a very great runner. great runner and a great writer about running. He wrote the foreword to the book. So he did meditate on that. And he's a funny guy. And there's a sense of humor to his writing. And, he noted that basically the running theme is obsession, perhaps some sort of mental imbalance. Like the question is, why are these people doing this? It's one thing to ride your bike to the store. It's another thing to need to ride 100 miles every Saturday. What sort of demons are these people trying to vanquish? And I think that could possibly be a unifying theme. I mean, it's not entirely. If you think about Evans Tibet, I mean, that's a little bit more of a first world kind of mentality. Evans Tibet ran in part because when he was a kid, he didn't have any toys or anything. That was just a way to entertain himself. That's what he did. It wasn't in the mode of like, I'm going to develop a training program. He just be like, I'm going to run to that other village. I don't even know how far it is. That's what I'm going to do. So, you can make broad conclusions to a certain extent, but it doesn't apply universally.
But it's one thing being Evans Tibet and pursuing, excellence and to some extent glory. But it's another thing spending 10 years of your life or 15 years of your life hiking around the world or trying to hike around the world because this story isn't even finished yet and no one even knows about it.
Okay, now you're referencing this guy, Carl Bushby.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories, actually, in the book.
It's one of mine, too, because, I actually, I don't think he would be offended if I said this, but he's a little bit of a loser, I just think that losers are more interesting than winners. I heard the sports writer Roger Angell, who died recently, he wrote very eloquently about baseball, and he was talking about my favorite team, the Red Sox. And this was before they started winning. They had a drought of 87 years.
Yes,
were cursed, and he just felt like, why is it that people so love the Red Sox? And he's like, because being a human is mostly about losing. Like there's one team that wins every year, but
everyone else is a loser. Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of our condition. And so this guy, in a sense, embodies that. Your question is why does he do that? I think in that guy's case, it does sort of stem back to his loserhood. He was in the parachute unit of the Royal Air Force. He's a British guy. I think his dad wanted him to do this, and he could barely make it, and he had to try out numerous times. And then when he was in there, he was the slowest guy, and the whole venture, which I guess to give listeners the broad picture, this guy is trying to hike, and not only hike, but make his way 25,000 miles around the globe. And he's from England. He's resolved never to go back there until he finishes this circumnavigation of the globe. And so he has not seen his father, to whom he's close and he's in constant contact, in 25 years or something. Yeah, it's maybe 22 years or something at this point. But in any case, the trip is just thwarted in ways that you couldn't even imagine. He crossed the Bering Strait, very, very dangerous thing to do. And he's not the greatest explorer in the world. He's just this guy out there bumbling around, crosses the Bering Strait illegally, jumping from one floe of ice to another, gets to the Russian side and was arrested and detained. And then he had to, he was barred from Russia for a number of years, 5 years or something. So that just held the whole thing up for 5 years. And, it's on and on like that. He just had to swim. He just did a swim across, I think it was the Black Sea, because he couldn't get the visas and so on to do the land journey. So this is taking him forever. You know, I mean, it's such a saga and it's such a heart-wrenching story that's just much better than, like, you know, if he did it
Easy.
sprinting every day and it was clockwork, and, you know, it wouldn't be that interesting a story. So
Yeah, I would put that one in the sad category too, because it seems like, like he's alone all the time in different parts of the world, and he's missing out on a family that he seems close to. Like, it's one thing, like you had a different story about a different person who was a bit estranged from his family and he was cycling, but
oh yeah.
but this hiker, he's not estranged from his family. It seems like, he has a son that he didn't see grow up because of this goal that he has. But it's not that he doesn't love him or that he didn't want to be there. It's like, it's just he's got this big goal, kind of.
Yeah.
He's possessed by his objective. I mean,
Yes.
obsession doesn't even touch on the word,
It's
really.
overtaken his life. That is
Yeah.
his life. And he's given up so much. Like, there was pretty central to that tale was a story. He fell in love with this woman, I think it was Colombia, and he would go back to see her, but you know, he was hiking, and it was this massive romance, and you know, the guy is sort of a romantic in with a capital R. You know, anyway, they had to break up, but the whole thing was sort of operatic. Yeah, it transcends rational. It's just like,
Mhm.
why are you doing this? But yeah.
Amazing.
Another thing that transcends rational. I don't know. Like, I really want to ask about the U.S. Army and the Arctic expedition. But let's talk about irrational first, which to me, irrational seems like
Well, I think that actually
here.
could be considered irrational as well.
You
But
think, okay, let's go there because you know what? I've been, I mean, probably not as north as you have, because the village I worked at, which was like the starting story of the podcast, it was
okay,
at the 60th parallel. Um,
okay,
so I think like you are more far north than that.
I was north
Um,
of that. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. When I was up there, and I remember seeing this was the Canadian Army that was up there for some training.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. My thought was like, well, why would you need to know? I mean, there are no wars in Arctic climates. Uh, but in your story, like you found out that um there could be a threat, and there is valid reason maybe to know how to survive in the Arctic. So I don't know. Do you want to tell us about your experience?
You actually went there as well. You went on maneuvers with these guys.
Yeah, yeah. So what year were you in Canada? Or in
It
northern
was
Canada?
2007 to 2009. So
Okay.
I don't remember exactly when they were up there, like at what point. Maybe they were even up there more than once, but like the time that I remember, it was just, all of a sudden there are all these like army helicopters landing at the airports.
This is northern Quebec, huh?
This is
Yeah.
northern Quebec, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the Canadians got a jump on the Americans. I went to the Arctic in 2017, and at that time, Vladimir Putin was very much stepping up his campaign to take dominion over the Arctic, which is becoming an increasingly strategic place amid climate change,
Mm,
Yeah.
because you know, ice is melting, resources that were once unattainable because of ice, because of they were buried and so on, or you couldn't cut through the sea to get to them. They're now gettable. Uh,
mm,
so there's 9 Arctic nations. Putin, by far, is winning the race in terms of militarizing that area. He has, at that time, he had, I think, 40 military bases in the Arctic, many ice-breaking ships, and so on. And the U.S. had 1 or 2 bases, and maybe no bases, and you know, the ice-breaking ships it had were broken. Uh, so it just really didn't look very good for the U.S. It still doesn't, but they were trying to do one thing, which is up their game in ski warfare, which many people maybe haven't heard of it, but it's kind of like guerrilla warfare on skis. And the prominent example was in 1939, the winter of 1939, 1940, in Finland, there was what was called the Long War. This was a part of World War II, but in any case, the Russians got there with big tanks, very heavily financed, and they were going to take over this territory. But with the Finns, they were better skiers. The Russians, I guess, were supposedly they were mostly from southern Russia where people didn't ski or something. So the Finns spent all winter basically choking these Russians off from any resources. Just they were skiing circles around them and patrolling them, and they won. They beat the Russians, and this story looms large in Finnish history. In any case, the U.S. military was trying to cultivate these same skills, so they sent 15 or so soldiers out to do a 3-day, 30-mile backcountry ski trip, which involved towing sleds, carrying equipment through the Brooks Range, and I went with them, and it was an adventure.
I bet. How cold was it, first of all, so that our listeners know? Because it gets pretty
So
darn cold up there. Was it winter or was it like
it was
a little milder?
almost exactly this time of year. It was
Okay.
March 21st, right around. So it was like the
Still pretty
equinox.
frozen.
It was frozen, but the days were getting very much longer every day. Yeah, the coldest I saw was minus 31 Fahrenheit. That was right when we got there. And there was just an element of total stupidity to this trip because these people they had to take orders from on high as to where to camp, for example. And the cold lingered. I don't really know the thermodynamics, but for some reason, the cold goes to low places.
Yeah.
So we were obliged to camp.
Well, heat rises, so by definition, cold descends.
I guess that's it. Yeah. So we could have set our tents on a hillside where it would have been like 5 degrees below zero, but we had to go, and there's quite a variety, quite a range, but we had to camp in this pit basically, and it was because that was what had been told. Their higher ups had told them to do. So it was minus 31 there, and that was the first day. And then most of the rest of the time, it wasn't nearly as bad. It was about zero, but it's cold because we're camping,
Yeah.
So you have moments that if you want to tie your ski boots, you have moments to take your gloves off, squeeze them between your legs so they don't touch the snow, and then tie your boot and put the gloves back on before your hands just are like frozen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just for reference, that minus 31 Fahrenheit is minus 35 degrees Celsius, which is like pretty normal up there for like a really long time during the year. I guess it's probably longer if you're up higher, but yeah, I mean, you'd have at least December, January, February at those temperatures where I was staying. So
Cold.
it's cold, yeah. 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 So camping where you have no reprieve from the cold. Like you're always in the cold. So if you get cold, like how do you warm yourself up? Like it's not that easy. So it's almost like prevention. You just have to not ever get too cold.
And what's the definition of success for a trip like that? Is it you all come back alive, or you have to capture the flag on the hill or something, or I don't know.
Yeah, it was pretty random. I mean, they just traced this loop through the territory and we finished it, and that was it. There was no like quarry that we were seeking or something.
The thing that struck me reading that story is that he's not writing about these guys. He's inserted. If you were a warfare correspondent, you'd be inserted with the troops, wouldn't you, to report? And it struck me that for many of these stories, you're physically engaged with the story. You go to the place, you go on the event, or you're physically engaged with, is it important for you in the story to place yourself physically into the story in terms of getting a good feel for it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that story would have been a lot less interesting if we get up there and I was like, okay, boys, I'm going to wait in the car and I'll see you in 3 days. I mean, I'll be honest. There is a way of telling a story. I did this since the book came out. There's a woman named Lowell Wilcox who rode her bike around the world, and I didn't do it with her. I actually rode, I don't know, 70, 80 miles with her. But the story that I told was just kind of a recap, if you will, mainly from a podcast that she did every day. I was able to get the transcript and cobble it together from that. But no, I mean, I think that, there's a famous line from the war correspondent, Robert Capa, photographer. He said, if your photos are no good, you're not close enough. And, Robert Capa is the guy who, there's a very famous photo of from the Spanish Civil War, 1938 or something, I think, where you see like literally the bullet going into some guy's head. Like he was that close to take that picture. And, I think that applies. You have to be there. You have to be in the cold. You have to, get dirty, be in the mud, feel what they feel. And then the story is going to be a lot deeper, almost always. So it's valuable in that sense. And I guess I just personally have a romance for it too. It's fun to, to do that, to go out, if you can do it. Some things I can't do and I don't try. You have to be pretty calculating about what you can pull off. I mean, I'm a decent cross-country skier, so I knew I could do that. And so I did. Yeah.
What about another obscure sport, which is stair climbing?
Oh, yeah.
Stair climbing competitions. I had no idea that this was a thing. I
Did
mean,
you run up the stairs?
I had heard about doing the stairs of
I've
the
heard of the
Empire
Empire
State
State
Building.
Building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that I didn't know this was like a full-fledged competition that people like registered for, and now there's a waiting
Like
list.
I'm a
And
professional stair climber.
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know there were multiple of these around the world.
Yeah, it's a thing. And my younger brother was a leading light in this sport.
Oh,
And
wow.
his friend was even more leading. So I had a little window into it. Yeah, but it's pretty funny. It's actually, to my mind, a kind of a dumb sport because the scenery couldn't be any less compelling. You're in dusty stairwells. I mean, I get it as a workout. When I've traveled, I've run upstairs. It's, you're in a hotel and you don't have a lot of time. You get your heart rate way up running upstairs.
Very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing to do. To me, it's just funny. It's such an absurd sport. So it was fun to dive into it.
I wonder if the Burj Khalifa, the highest building in the world, I wonder if it has a stairwell that goes right to the top.
Where is that?
There's a building in, is it Dubai? I think it might be in Dubai. Burj Khalifa.
Yeah, there's a race up that. I mean, they go for all the big buildings because the
Okay.
model is this. These things are usually fundraisers, and they're also for a place like Kuala Lumpur, they're a way to get visibility.
Yeah.
So there's an economic incentive to hold these races,
Okay.
and they always go for the iconic buildings.
I guess that would be part of the attraction. Oh, I'm going to this place to do this
When I was reading the
building.
story, I was thinking it looks a bit like bobsleighing.
How's
It looks
that?
a bit like the bobsleigh because there are two aspects. There's a very short sprint aspect, and you have to fight very hard to be over the first 10 seconds to be the first one to get to the stair, because getting past and it's a little like when you start the bobsleigh, you're all pushing like mad things for the first 5 seconds or something, and then
Okay,
Basically,
let me.
the event then happens after that.
Well, Esbru, as they call the Empire State Building run up, is sort of exceptional in that regard. Almost all other stair races are interval start.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
No, I prefer the 300-man mass start, uh, 15 meters away from the stairwell.
Oh
I
my
think that would
goodness.
be
well, I will
adds,
say that in cross
adds
country,
to the interest.
That sounds like an injury waiting to happen.
it's dangerous. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think some people reported that they got banged into the wall and stuff. But yeah, in cross country skiing, there are essentially two kinds of starts. There's interval starts and mass
yeah,
starts,
yeah,
and I much prefer the mass starts.
yeah. I've done the mass start at the Canadian Ski Marathon,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and as a beginner skier, really, but trying to develop my endurance capabilities, and that's terrifying. The mass start.
A Canadian story. I skied the Gatineau Loppet in
Oh yeah, yeah.
2022, and about I should say about 100 yards into the race, maybe 200 yards into the race, some guy fell in front of me, and I was in a mass pileup.
Yeah.
10
Oh
people.
no.
Yeah,
Ouch.
that was always my fear. At the bottom of a hill or something, I'd lose control and then I just get collected by the people coming down behind me.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
That's my biggest fear, even when I just go cross country skiing, like on a normal day. So
Oh,
I'm terrified. I usually just like make sure that there's absolutely nobody behind me, and if there is, I let them all go first.
d-
yeah. You don't want to be stopped and like
no,
in the middle of the trail on a hill where there's a turn or something. That's
yeah.
a bad
You just shout as loud as you can. I think that seems to be my
idea.
cry for help. Um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
did, in the book, did you have any personal favorites among the stories or the characters in the book, or maybe a story that meant something in particular to you?
Well, I mean, a couple. I guess there's two kinds of stories in the book. The vast majority of them are reported, and then a few of them are sort of first person.
Yes.
I mean, there's some that are a blend, but the ones that are blend are mainly they're not about me. They're not about my experience. They're about somebody else or a race or something. Um, but in terms of the reported stories, the one that I'm most happy with was the first one in the book called Wonder Boy, which basically I went to India to report a piece on a boy who at age 4.5 ran 37 miles without stopping. It was just such a immense tale. I mean, when you're a journalist like I am, I don't exactly have a beat. I'm looking for stories, for big tales, and I saw a little piece in the New York Times about this kid, and I was just like, oh my god, that's just like manna from heaven, when you see something like that. And it was just such a tale on the vast scale, and all kind. I mean, it wasn't really a happy story. This
Mm.
kid had come from poverty, and his coach was pretty corrupt. His coach was later murdered. It was just a huge tale that was interesting and very illuminating about India. As far as like stories in which I was involved, I guess my favorite would be a story that it was one of the earliest stories in the book from 2000, I guess 2006. I went to this island in the Caribbean called Dominica,
Oh, yes.
and the premise was that we were going to ride our bikes around the island, but nobody had ever done this before. It was a preposterous thing because it's just incredibly hilly there. But we just had a very crazy adventure, and for me, it was written at a time where I had taken many years off from being an athlete, and I was just getting back into it. I had been injured and so on, so it was incredibly, what do I want to say, gratifying to sort of,
Fulfilling.
yeah, to reunite with that aspect of my own past, because as I said, when I was in college,
Mm.
running was so central to me.
Yeah,
So
I was sure you're going to, on personal experiences, I was sure you're going to talk about pogo sticks, but There you
Uh,
go.
well, yeah. So I guess what you're referencing is in the book. This is the earliest story in the book. I wrote it literally in 1987. No, 1989 when I was 25. But it recounts. At that time, of course, I didn't have a lot of material for memoir, being so young. But I did have one, which was my pursuit in 1974 when I was 10 years old of the world pogo stick jumping record. And so that's recounted in the book. And I had a brief dalliance with fame. I was on the
Hmm.
front page of the local newspaper. And I
Did
was on.
your mom save a copy, or like do you have a copy of that
Oh,
still?
I have a copy. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
What I don't have is I was on TV as well. I don't have that clip. That's
Yeah.
lost
It's
to time.
like it's really hard to have, before having smartphones where now you can record everything. Like it would have been hard to have that. But
That would have taken a lot of work. But yeah,
yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I did find the other day was negatives. My mom got from the reporter from the newspaper was the Hartford Current the negatives from the photo shoot she did, and I found them. And then I also later found out how difficult it is at this juncture to get negatives developed. It's like,
Yeah.
There's no facilities anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you should keep those for the illustrated version of Unbound when second edition comes out or something.
Mm.
yeah, I certainly didn't throw them away, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, there's a saying, show me the boy at 7 years old and I will show you the man. So
Yeah.
there you were, pogo stick in hand, and here you are now.
Well,
I guess the endurance love continues through. It's
yeah, I don't think it's the line between this kid who jumped 17,000 so many times and the guy who like has to ride his bike, ridiculous miles every weekend or every day. The connection's pretty obvious, I guess, you know.
So where do you want to direct listeners that would like to get a copy of the book?
Barnes and Noble is good. Bookshop.com. I try not to advocate for Jeff Bezos and Amazon, but if you have to, your local bookshop, you can order it. Those are good places.
Perfect. And then if people want to follow you, or read other things that you've written or anything like that, do you want to direct them anywhere? Do you have any social media?
Yeah, I mean, I am on Twitter. That's not my platform of choice, but they can find me there. Bill Donahue, writer. Make sure it's me. There's another guy who's religious with my name. My name is Donahue. Also, I have a website, BillDonahue.net. If you want, I have a mailing list. You can get on the mailing list there. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. I do want to say I'm imminently. I had a Substack, and I'm imminently going to relaunch one. This will not really be about endurance sports, but rather about the region in which I live. So
okay. And that's New Hampshire, so that's a pretty cool region.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Live free or die,
That's
I think
right.
is
That's
their
right.
phrase, isn't it?
We'll link the website in the show notes, and we're following you on Instagram, so definitely can
Okay.
link that as well for people if they want to, follow you directly from the show notes.
Okay. I need to be more religious about my Instagramming. I'm not that good.
Yeah, we're not that great either, but because we have an episode every 2 weeks, like there's definitely a post every 2 weeks, but in between it's a little bit sparse.
Okay,
It,
that's all
it
right.
could use some improvement.
Okay.
All that remains for us to do probably now, other than go on and give away all the content of all the stories in the book, which we don't want to, because we'd like to send our listeners to the written word, because the written word says it a lot more eloquently and in a more interesting fashion than we do in our talking to some extent. So thanks for your time, Bill. We'll do our summaries after this, but it's been fascinating talking to you, and we've learned that it's your network connections to some extent that get you in for stories and experiences. So we view you as part of our network connection now. So your network connection is now our network connection. So
That's
if we
right.
need to get into a podcast with somebody somewhere, we're keeping you on file.
That's good.
But
Okay. Okay.
but
Well,
thanks. We really
no,
enjoyed
it's
it.
been great. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.
Okay, Alan, you first?
Okay, so Unbound by Bill Donahue. Very quickly. The book's beautifully presented and contains a series of standalone stories or articles and is therefore sort of easy to read. There's no thread to be lost. You can read a whole story in sort of one sitting. So it's quite sort of fulfilling from that point of view. Some of the adventures we hear about in the book are sort of unfinished as they're a work in progress. We touched on some of those. Evans Chibet, for example, in the story, he hadn't run his last Boston Marathon that he won. But one of the things that I like about the book is that that Bill has updated the reader on current progress in a sort of list that he calls notable updates at the end. So he actually gives, oh, you're probably wondering what happened to this guy. Well, the latest news is this. Um,
I like that
so
section.
yeah, that's I think that's very cool. I noticed, Liz, in your summary you have picked your favorites, so I picked a
Hmm.
couple of favorites. My
Okay.
favorites were um, Running to Remember, which was the story of Koo Stephen, a native Indian runner, and the ultra run he developed to the native burial site of 215 native children found in Canada.
That one has a Canadian
Yeah,
connection.
Canadian connection and Native American connection. Very moving. Um, The Million Mile Man, the story of Danny Chu, who was an Asperger's person and was mono focused on cycling and wanted to cycle 1 million miles in his life and was cycling some phenomenal distances. But then also had an accident and became paraplegic and started to learn to ride a hand cycle and well, various things that happened to him. I thought that was incredible. Talking about incredible, The Long Way Home. We talked about it in the podcast, the story of Carl Bushby and his obsessive world hike, which is taking him well over a decade, 15 years or something, and he's still not finished yet.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, before I give you my favorites, which are not the same as yours,
Cool.
I'll just comment on the cover photo because I thought the cover photo was great. It's sort of like it's a runner running along a ridge with nothing but blue skies in front, and it's taken like kind of from the back of the runner, so sort of almost like like you're running with the runner. Um, so I thought that was great. I felt like it fit the spirit of the book because it's like you see mountains, so it's sort of like adventure and freedom, and I don't know. I thought it was a great cover. Also being hardcover is kind of nice as well. Yeah, like I guess the favorite, like it was divided into sections. My favorite section was probably, overall it was the running one. But I found myself liking the exploration section at least just as much. And I think that part of that was the story about Sarah Marquis, who's a female explorer, and that we kind of touched on in the discussion. But my three favorite stories, or the ones that stood out, I guess, for different reasons in the book, were the Challenger, which was the story about Evans Chibet. I liked Breaking Up the Boys Club, which was about Sarah Marquis, who also happens to be a National Geographic's explorer, which is, just goes to show you, like, just she's the real deal.
She absolutely is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's, yeah, 100% badass. And then Taking Aim on the New Cold War, which was the story about the U.S. Army and how they, like, why they think defending the Arctic has maybe become a bit more important, even in today's world of, drones and satellites and being able to have cameras everywhere. We didn't really talk about it in the discussion, but there's in the story it's kind of really well described and um, a little bit so it's a little bit chilling, I find too, because yeah, it just talks about just how all these nations are it's becoming kind of important to be able to defend yourself all the way up north, which I don't know, like being a Canadian and seeing the map of Canada, I was always kind of just like, oh, the north, like there's nothing there because it's so cold, which is it's safe from there.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting that we're talking about it being more accessible. I don't think it's very accessible.
No, still sounds pretty darn cold to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely
But yeah.
deadly.
Yeah. I think the book would be for, I think, anybody who likes to read magazine articles more than books. So it's basically magazine articles all compiled into like one big book format. So the stories stand alone, like Alan said, and it's easy to, just read one. And then you don't even have to read them in order. You can read the one that you feel like reading right now, or even the section you feel like reading and put it aside and read the other ones later. And then because it's a lot of human stories, I guess anybody that enjoys memoirs, I think they would enjoy this book because I find that even though the stories are short, it's very much like stories about people and then also the environment that surrounds them. So I think could be a good fit for anybody that likes memoirs.
Good stuff. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to the publisher, Roman and Littlefield, for providing review copies of the book. And a great big thank you to Bill Donahue for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us some feedback about how we can improve the podcast or suggest a book for future review, please leave us comments on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please don't forget to follow us on social media or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you are enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends about us. Share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. Leave us a review on Apple Podcast if this is how you listen, or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. We are now on Buy Me a Coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com, look for a creator called Running Book Reviews, and you can find all our various extras there. And you can also buy us a coffee if you want, but you don't feel that you have to. It's not necessary. That's all for today from Running Book Reviews. Bye for now.
Bye.